Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins, a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and sacred scriptures, along with information on topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Korda. Wineskins is brought to you by the Annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, I will interview Kitty Sherer and Jim Knight on human trafficking. It is part one of a three-part series from our television show Spotlight. We will also look at the life of St. Leo the Great, as well as reflections on the readings for this 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time. That and more coming up on Wineskins. In our current issue, Father Chris Luoni, Director of Church Vocations for the Diocese of Youngstown, will tell us about the week of prayer for vocations.
The first full week of November, we celebrate National Vocation Awareness Week throughout the country. Now, while we work to promote vocations throughout the year, this week is especially set aside to work and pray for vocations. From November 5th through November 11th, we celebrate this week. As we know, we're all called to a vocation. Some are called in a special way to live a vocation as a priest, a brother, a sister, or as a deacon. Now, God instills this calling in one's heart. It's not something that you're going to go out and get. You're not going to manufacture it or buy it. Don't get admission to it. It only comes from God. And to understand this calling, there is a need to enter into daily prayer with Him, as well as take advantage of such opportunities as Eucharistic adoration and the Rosary. In a survey of men ordained to the priesthood this year, 74% of them said that they entered into Eucharistic adoration on a regular basis. 69% of them also offered that they consistently prayed the Rosary. Now, these, along with other forms of prayer, have helped young men and women not only hear and understand their call from God, but to have the courage to follow it as well. And we should not be only having individual prayer, but communal prayer as well. In our parishes, in our homes as families, in our schools, and many other places. As God told us, where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in their midst. God is with us and hears our prayers. And of course, the greater our prayer, the greater He hears us. But along with our prayer, there also needs to be support. The newly ordained as well offered in their survey that 82% of them were encouraged by at least 4 people to consider a calling to the priesthood. This is a combination of family, friends, parishioners, co-workers, pastors, parish staff members, all of these who personally offered support to young men and women. It's helped them to know their call, to understand it, and to follow Him. We have to remember that as vocation director, the vocation director is the vocation director, not the vocation finder. We all have a responsibility to help promote vocations to the priesthood, the religious life, and the diaconate. It's not just up to a few. Consider that this calling to serve in the church can come from one's own home, the family. How beautiful it would be if a call for your son or daughter, grandson or granddaughter, or other family member or friend came to serve in the religious life or as a priest. How do we do this? How do we make prayer and action real so that it helps others? In what ways can we support our children and our families, in our schools, and in our parishes? Well, first, we need to listen to them. What are their desires, their dreams? How do they see God working in their lives, and how do they see God working in their own lives? Sometimes our talking with them helps them understand what they're thinking and feeling. We need to recognize their gifts and talents. That's our second one. What do they lend themselves to marriage or to single life? Could it be to the priesthood or religious life? By helping them recognize their gifts and knowing what they are and are not good at, we can help direct them to the right path. The next one, pray often and actively support even more. We need to pray as families, as friends, as parishioners. We need to pray as individuals. We need to pray as our parish communities. We need to pray that those who are being called will be open to God's will, but we also need to be open to God's will as well for the good of others. We don't want to be standing in the way of God. During the week, on Wednesday, November 8th, throughout select parishes in our diocese in the state of Ohio, Eucharistic adoration for vocations will be offered at various times throughout that day. Please consult youngstownvocations.org or the flyers and bulletins that have been posted throughout our parishes to find the place and time nearest you. When we see someone who has that sense that they may be called to religious life or priesthood, don't be afraid to say something to him or her. Whenever I have encouraged someone to consider service to the church, as a layperson, as a priest, or as a religious, I've always found the person appreciative, even when they knew that they were not called to that way of life. They were grateful that someone took the time to support them. Now, typically when I did offer support and they had a sense of God's priestly call, they would smile big and talk more of the call. It felt good for them to be affirmed in that calling. Be a parish or a school that supports an active culture of vocations. That is, active prayer in many forms and active support of the young people in the community. And this happens through the programs, the conversations, the inclusion in all facets of our parish life. Then we will not only see a lively, energetic parish, but a community where the young feel affirmed in their lives and in the path God calls them to follow. And with this support, our young feel stronger and more confident to say yes to whatever path God is calling them to take. Vocation Awareness Week is an important week for all of us, as we all have a stake in the prayer and support that leads to those individuals called by God and to follow in His way. As a disciple of Christ, what will you do with this important week to make a difference in the lives of others so that they know they are loved and supported as they seek to do God's will? For Wineskins, this is Father Christopher Luoni.
This coming Friday, the Church celebrates the feast of St. Leo the Great. To tell us more is Pam Pasquale. She is from St. Charles Church in Boardman.
Leo the Great, known as the Saintly Pope, died on November 10th in the year 461. He was declared a Doctor of the Church in 1754. Born in Tuscany around 395, he was Roman in education and in mentality. In the year 440, he was in France in order to reconcile warring factions, and from there he was called by the people and the clergy to succeed Pope Sixtus III. As Pope, he defended the faith against heresy, and in 443 convoked an assembly to expose common errors against the Church. In his pontificate, Leo defended the doctrine of the Incarnation through the Council of Chalcedon. His activities extended into various fields: liturgy, politics, preaching, and writing. He was without doubt the most influential personage of the 5th century. The prayers of the Mass, taken from the Sacramentary of Verona, touch on the 3 aspects of his personality. First, the opening prayer is based on the text, "Thou art Peter." We ask God, never allow the power of hell to prevail against your church, founded on the rock of the Apostle Peter. In the second lesson for the Office of Readings, there is a quotation from the sermon preached by Pope Leo on the anniversary of his episcopal ordination. It shows that his awareness of being the successor of St. Peter is very modern. The second aspect is also found in the opening prayer, where we ask, through the prayers of Pope Leo the Great, keep us faithful to your truth and secure in your peace. Not only did St. Leo establish peace in ecclesiastical matters, but he persuaded Vandals not to burn the city or murder its civilians. In the prayer over the gifts, we ask that the Church continue to grow everywhere under your guidance and under the leadership of shepherds pleasing to you. Pope Leo was a model for the flock in his defense of the weak and the persecuted. The third aspect is found in the prayer after communion, in which we pray, "Under your powerful guidance, may the Church grow in freedom and continue in loyalty to the faith." Pope Leo instituted some new feasts, such as the Chair of St. Peter, and he gave greater emphasis to the Feast of Christmas. He also replaced pagan celebrations with the penitential practice of fast and abstinence to mark the 4 seasons of the year. He is the great defender of the mystery of the Incarnation and a champion of peace and freedom for the Church. The relevance of this feast is expressed in the antiphon for the Canticle of Mary. Day after day, Peter proclaims to the whole church, "You are Christ, the Son of the living God." The testimony of St. Leo the Great, defender of the Incarnation and promoter of church unity, can be a stimulus for the fostering of peace and fidelity in our own day. As he stated in his allocution on his election as Pope, as what Peter believed about Christ is always valid, so also what Christ gave to Peter will always endure. For Wineskins, I'm Pam Pasquale.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Korda. Today we're going to talk about the topic of human trafficking. And to help me in the discussion is Kitty Sherer and Jim Knight. Welcome both of you to Spotlight.
Thank you, Father. We're very happy to be here.
Thank you. This is a very important issue and something that as we mentioned prior to the taping, really kind of a new thing that has really affected the lives of many, many people. And oftentimes when we think of human trafficking, we think of something that happens overseas, but it's something that's really affecting us here, right in our own backyards. We'd like to get as much information out as we can, but before we do that, we know that there's an organization called PATHS, Partners Against Trafficking Humans, Stark County in particular. Let's let the folks know what exactly PATHS is and tell us what your particular affiliation is with the organization. Kitty, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm a volunteer. Our group is all volunteers, and I've been with the group about 8 years, and it's a collaborative that actually is trying to do its part to educate the public and provide services for human trafficking victims and to educate the public to be on the lookout for it and what they can do about it. I'm the treasurer. We don't have a lot of big bucks coming in or anything, but we do take donations, so we use those in our education of the public.
And Jim, what about your involvement in the organization?
Yes, I work as a crime prevention specialist with the Stark County Prosecutor John Ferrero's office. Since my background is in crime prevention and raising awareness about that, human trafficking was something I wanted to get. Awareness of human trafficking was what I wanted to get involved with, as that was a perfect fit. So I've been very fortunate to help this organization. I serve as overseer of education and our speakers bureau for it.
You mentioned the word organization, and I noticed, Kitty, that you're speaker for the organization. How important is it to educate the public about this issue? And why is it important for us to do that and for you to do that?
Well, it's a huge issue, but it's also very complicated. Everybody seems to kind of have an idea of what it is. We call it modern slavery. And even though it's a global problem, it's very difficult to address. And so there are so many different hidden aspects of it that it's hard for, say, law enforcement on its own to, ferret it out and do something about it. So it takes everybody, it takes the whole public to be aware of it and to be able to fight it. And it's a huge industry, and unfortunately in this world where there's a lot of money involved, it's a $150 billion industry. It's second only, I think, to illegal arms sales. I think it's ahead of drug trafficking worldwide at this point. So it's kind of like when there's a lot of money to be made, there's a lot of people that are greedy and want to part of that action. So it takes all of us working together to be aware of it, to try and do something about it, and to potentially save the victims themselves.
Why don't we get into our discussion specifically about defining what human trafficking is, because oftentimes the folks that might be with us don't understand the full impact of what it is. So let's define that first.
Basically what it is modern slavery. Here in the United States, people thought that we eradicated slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. So now when you say that, no, there's slavery going on, they're like, well, no, not here. So they hear about it in other parts of the world, in Eastern Europe, in the Far East and stuff. But it goes on right here in the United States. And so it's not only a global problem, it's a national problem, and it's a local problem right here in the Youngstown area and in Northeast Ohio. But the definition that we use is anyone who's involved in recruiting people, harboring them, which means by housing them, transporting them from place to place, providing them to somebody who wants to use a person, and obtaining them. And these can be for anything from a commercial sex act to labor services. And when they do that, they are using what we call force, fraud, or coercion. And it's kind of like people are doing this not of their own free will, is basically what it comes down to.
Let's talk about the legal part of it, because obviously when you're talking about human lives, and many of them probably underage human lives,
right,
we're talking about a crime. So from your aspect, Jim, what is all involved in that criminally?
Well, basically, I mean, I think Kitty had touched on a lot of it, but especially when she had pointed out that human trafficking does occur through force, fraud, or coercion, and we do have penalties now in place that can charge, especially the trafficker, and we now look at those, especially if they're exploited in the sex commercial aspect, we will be treating them more as victims. If they're under 18, immediately we are not going to be seeing them or necessarily charging them. We are going to be looking at them as victims. So we are taking more of a rehabilitative approach. But the punishments can be more stronger for the traffickers themselves.
Sure. Let's talk about some of the numbers that's involved, because I'm sure you have some statistics, and those probably are going to be staggering, I would think.
Globally, around the world, International Labor Organization tries to keep track, and they have estimated 21 million victims. Now, we have to be careful with statistics because, people can manipulate them any which way. But as I said before, it's a $150 billion industry. So that's a lot of victims and a lot of money. 2/3 of these victims are involved in forced labor. The sex trafficking seems to get more of the attention. It's more, exciting for people to hear about in the news and stuff. But really, around the world, 2/3 of the people that are involved in being trafficked are forced labor. And of that number, 1/4 of the people are children. So you're talking about a huge number that are underage children that should be the protected part of our population. And over half, then, of the victims are female, so women and children. It's a huge problem.
For more information on that current issue and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doy.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Christopher Minutes, thoughts on making every day count. Here's Monsignor Jim Lisanti.
Hello, friends. Owen Bradford Butler had a knack for sales. His talent propelled him up the corporate ladder at Procter & Gamble till he became chairman of the board. But Mr. Butler believed that he should use his skills for more than just personal career advancement. In particular, he had an interest in early childhood development. Mr. Butler became a passionate advocate for children, often speaking out on corporate America's responsibility to support their development. Today, Bright Beginnings, the program he helped create in Colorado, brings an increasing number of newborns and their moms support each year. My friends, if your talents bring you success, it's important to give something back to the community. Whenever you help someone in need, you create a brighter future for them and for yourself. I'm Monsignor Jim Lisanti. Thanks for listening, and God bless you.
By the time we can walk, each of us yearns for the joy that comes from being able to do for ourselves. Church World Service believes that being self-reliant is a joy everyone should share. So around the block or around the world, share the joy. Church World Service. 33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
The song we have for you today is from the CD called Fight the Fight. It is by Chris Muglia.
You were faithful to the Father not so long ago. Before someone you trusted let you down. But Now you're not so sure if you can give your trust again to a God who let your hero fall. You recall a childhood memory of innocence. You recall a peace that only comes from God. Did you know that He invites you to receive His love again? Did you know that He can heal your broken heart? Come home. The Father welcomes you. He is waiting there with open arms for a child that He once knew. Come home. The Father welcomes you. He will take your heart of pain and make your heart brand new. Today it seems impossible to trust again. Today it would be easier to hide. All you have to do is open up your heart to God, and tomorrow you'll be thankful that you tried. Come home. The Father welcomes you. He is waiting there with open arms for a child that He once knew. Come home. The Father welcomes you. He will take your heart of pain and make your heart brand new. And when you feel alone and you wonder if you're home, all you have to do is pray and believe that God is there. Father welcomes you. He is waiting there with open arms for a child that He once knew. Come home. The Father welcomes you. He will take your heart of pain and make your heart brand new.
And to tell us about the scriptures for this 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time is Father Larry Frient. He is pastor of St. Paul the Apostle Church in New Middletown and canonical pastor of Holy Rosary Church in Lowville.
What would happen if a group of 14-year-old boys would become marooned with no adults present on a deserted island? How long would they enjoy the adventure of exploring the island, the freedom of being all on their own? Some years ago, William Golding wrote a popular novel entitled Lord of the Flies. The book told us that a plane evacuating them from England during World War II crash-landed on the Pacific Ocean. The boys were not injured, but the pilot and the co-pilot were both killed. After the boys enjoyed themselves on the island for a while, everything went sour. They bickered and fought. They split into rival groups. Gradually, they turned savage and began killing each other. Golding's story reminds us that people need laws and structures for guidance. Without laws and structures, chaos results. nothing is considered sacred. No one is properly respected. Years ago, the Jewish people realized their need for laws if they were to survive as a nation. As time went on, so many laws were made that it took more than 50 volumes to record all of these laws. Many people became discouraged and stopped trying to keep many of the most important laws. The scribes and the Pharisees looked down on people who did not try to observe all the laws. Jesus came to remind us that religion is not a book filled with rules and regulations. So what did Jesus emphasize? Christ told us that above everything else, we are to love God with everything that makes up our believing, and we're to love our neighbors as ourselves. All other commandments are subordinate to the laws of love. So often, we are reminded that we cannot be 100% consistent all of the time in each and every word and action and moment we live. We cannot expect others to be totally consistent either. God sees us as we are, human beings. He does not ask us to see through each other, but rather asks us to see each other through. Jesus taught best of all by example. He lived the law of love. He reached out to help carry the burdens of others. He cured the sick, raised the dead, and even taught people like St. Peter to forgive themselves for not being as perfect as they had once imagined themselves to be. Today, all of us can see what happens when people don't follow the most important laws, and what happens when lawmakers enact so many laws with so many loopholes that people lose a basic respect for laws. So what's the challenge for us? We are challenged to maintain a healthy attitude concerning law and a healthy attitude concerning love. Ultimately, we won't be judged by how much we've done all by itself, but by how much we put love into what we're doing, what we should do. For Wineskins, I'm Father Larry Frient.
The early Christian communities received the word of the missionary preaching as if it were truly the Word of God, which is now at work in us who believe. Good leaders are but humble servants. What is your experience of today's church leaders? Pray for our bishops, priests, deacons, religious, and teachers of religion. Wineskins is made possible through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. The program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Korda, saying thank you for being with us. Have a blessed week, and remember to pray for an increase in vocations to the priesthood and religious life.